I'm taking this topic all the way back to my very first video on the channel, Super Metroid vs. Metroid Dread. With the recent release of Mario Wonder, we now have a new entry to the franchise that very well could take the spot as the best 2D Mario. However, in its way is the iconic Super Mario World. I'm sure many of you might prefer Super Mario Bros. 3 or maybe even Yoshi's Island, but leading up to the release of Mario Wonder, many viewed it, including myself, as a callback to the title that revamped the franchise back in the 90s. For what it is, it absolutely set the plumber in a new direction, cleansing the branding away from the almost 2-decade-long run of New Super Mario Bros. But despite the massive graphical overhaul, did Wonder do enough to solidify itself as the best 2D Mario game of all time? Typically, I break games down by comparing the atmosphere, gameplay, and bosses, but for this video, I don't think that structure would do this topic justice. Instead, I'll be speaking on the most important aspect of a Mario game, and in the simplest of terms, what actually makes it fun. I knew right after completing the level with the dancing piranha plants that I would enjoy the game. This level just displayed charm that hasn't been seen in the franchise in a long time, and in all honesty, it never really let up. The art direction and setting of Wonder continued to impress me throughout my experience with the game, offering new but unique settings such as the Fungi Mines and Shining Falls. It truly felt like a breath of fresh air when compared to the overused locations of the Mushroom Kingdom. The art style looked like how I might have envisioned Mario World to be if I was born at the time of its release. It's a very saturated world full of personality, but it does have its flaws. In my opinion, I just don't like the overworld format of the levels. It reminded me very much so of 3D Land, which isn't a bad thing in itself, but it makes each level feel a bit more out of place and less organic with the floating random structures. Although it's a minute detail, I much prefer the layout of Mario World, where the progression feels more natural. You'll swim to a water area in the overworld, and sure enough, the level's water-based. As someone who appreciates the little things, this is indeed a little thing that does not go unnoticed. So besides just the fresh design of Wonder, it also added a surplus number of never before seen enemies. I mean, we got the Mumsies, the Maw, the Smackrolls, and of course the Hoppos. Something I love that Wonder did here, besides just adding new enemies, is how they actually made them a core part of the gameplay. Think about it, pretty much every level is focused around the mechanics of a given enemy. You spend an entire level evading the ice blocks from out of my ways, then you have to avoid getting seen by the somewhat frightening Maw, and of course, you get the chance to ride the Bull Rush. Besides just all these new additions, we were met with the comeback of the classics such as the Goombas, the Koopas, and the now walking piranha plants. All of the new enemies seamlessly integrated themselves into the franchise, and I for one hope for the return of most of them. However, the big change Wonder brought was not just the enemies necessarily, but the trippy gimmicks of the Wonder Flower. This is by far Wonder's biggest accomplishment. I'd go into every level excited just to see what each Wonder Flower brought to the experience. They completely changed the layout of a given level, whether it be switching up Mario's gameplay mechanics and form, or giving an enemy a newfound ability. There was always something happening, and at the same time, the speed of the game is increased along with the change of tune. Now, despite the variety that each level brought with the Wonder Flower, I would argue that this level structure didn't necessarily work out for the better in my experience. Now, before you get all upset over this statement, hear me out. The game overly relies on these somewhat quick events in almost every stage, taking away from the core, more classic platforming gameplay. But my biggest gripe that I believe this caused is the difficulty in pacing. By the time I got to the Sunbaked Desert, I felt like the difficulty had reached a plateau. I never really noticed levels getting more challenging, so this took away from my incentive to really do anything. I didn't care to collect purple coins, I didn't care to utilize badges, and I didn't care to stock up on lives. Granted, the live thing is a different issue because getting a game over in this title meant nothing considering you get automatic checkpoints. Mario Wonder spent too much time overly relying on the Wonder Flower gimmicks that they forgot to give people incentives through challenge. And because the game didn't seem to get more difficult, I didn't really notice myself getting better. I just found myself doing new things in new areas without any clear progression in my ability. This is an issue that Super Mario World does not have, as each area becomes increasingly difficult, making just reaching a checkpoint a true challenge. Mario Wonder does, however, carry a secret world with some of the only 5-star levels in the game. Now, some of these are truly challenging. One that I specifically struggled with was Climb to the Beat. Although challenging, I really think Wonder should have added more levels on par with these earlier in the game. Now, this is coming from someone who is above average but not great at platformers, so I understand the hesitancy to hold back on the challenge considering the massive audience for this game. So it's clear that Mario Wonder does a lot right, especially with the fresh aesthetic and that it carries a surplus amount of new enemies. However, it does have some downfalls such as I mentioned, but how does it hold up compared to the most renowned 2D game of the franchise? Super Mario World is a great example which shows that gaming is truly timeless. Despite being released in 1990, it is still better than the vast majority of modern 2D platformers, and I know that some would even argue that it's the best of all time. There's almost nothing about this game that I'd consider dated. It can be very difficult, but fair. The secret exits are hard to find, but you at least know which levels they'll be in. And it introduced enemies and songs that have developed alongside the long-standing franchise. After saying all of this, it could be hard to imagine what Wonder could have done better, but Mario Wonder actually did a handful of things that improved the 2D series. Mario World still plays great to this day from a mechanical perspective. The plumber is easy to control, his movements are reactive, and there's enough variety to keep you guessing. But after playing Wonder, there's no denying that Mario has never felt more smooth to play as. Once you add in the Wonder Flowers, you have a whole new experience along with a new and improved gameplay. However, despite these improvements, I think that's pretty much where it stops. Super Mario World capitalizes where its sequel fails, with the most obvious being the music. Although Mario World only has a handful of tunes, they do go a long way because of how memorable they've remained. Almost every track from this title is something to look forward to, even if you're playing a level you hate. As someone who's not a fan of the ghost houses, the eerie and stress-inducing sound made the experience for me that much better. It's almost unfair to compare the soundtracks here because Super Mario World truly carries some of the most iconic themes not just in Mario, but of all time. Now, even though Mario World has a limited amount of level design with its background aesthetics, it manages to do a lot with a little. When you think about it, there's really only around 8 variations in total, with some background changes such as in the Forest of Illusion. However, when playing through these stages, you never really feel like you're playing the same thing over and over. They all carry their own sort of gimmick, they might have a secret exit to look out for, or even introduce some new enemies. When playing through Mario World, I never really went through the motions because every death mattered, and therefore each stage felt more impactful. In addition to this, because I did not want to receive a game over, I would always look for coins, power-ups, and Yoshi coins, making me more attentive to each level. So in short, there's always something happening, new, or to look out for within pretty much every stage. Even though I already spoke on this, Wonder does not have this, but instead relies on the gimmicks of the Wonder Flowers. It's not just the incentives that Mario World does right, but also the pacing of the game with its gradual progression. In my opinion, the challenge doesn't really kick into gear until the Forest of Illusion, and then becomes increasingly difficult in Chocolate Island. But unlike Wonder, you really feel like you're becoming better at the game with each passing level. I feel like these are details you might not actually think about when playing a platformer, but as I covered in a previous video of mine, most of the greatest of the genre all have these variables in common. But the experience of Mario World does not end after defeating Bowser, and in all honesty, even though I'm making this video, I'm guilty in that I've never actually completed the game in full and beat the special zone. In fact, I've only done a few of the Star World levels, but finding the secret exits and fortresses is a part of the fun, and Mario Wonder does not have near the amount of fulfilling content that World does. I say fulfilling because I found the badge challenges and break time levels to be incredibly boring and somewhat pointless besides just collecting a flower. It felt to me like busy work, and I usually skipped them when I could, while although in Mario Mario World you might spend time looking for an exit, you at least feel rewarded for it, especially if it might lead you to a Switch Palace, Fortress, or the Star Road. Now, in spite of all of the wonderful things both of these titles have done for the franchise, if I'm being honest, neither carries boss fights worth talking about. In Mario World, you have the Koopalings who do all carry their own attacks, but they're easy and forgettable. The only reason I'd ever worry about dying from them is because I wouldn't want to restart a difficult level. In Wonder, you of course fight Bowser Jr. on several occasions, with each one becoming progressively just slightly more difficult. I was actually super disappointed to find out that even with all of the new enemies, we didn't see a single fresh boss fight. Regardless, the bosses here are not going to swing anyone in one direction or the other. So, where does that leave us? Both of the games at hand here are amazing in their own right. However, I think I've made it clear by now that Super Mario World is still the best 2D Mario game of all time, and I really don't think it's that close. As much as I enjoyed my experience with Wonder and all the fresh ideas and enemies that it brought, I really don't see myself going back to play it in the near future because of the reasons that I've already touched on. In fact, personally, I'd probably put Super Mario Bros. 3 over Wonder as well. That might be a hot take, but I stand by it. Very few titles in the over 30 years since Mario World's release have matched the longevity and charm of it, so it's a difficult game to go up against, especially within the same genre. It's an all-time great for a reason, and it'll remain that way pretty much forever. I hope I didn't make too many of you that mad with this take, but I do think this was an easy conclusion to come by, at least for me. However, let me know in the comments what your favorite 2D Mario is, and why you might like one game over the other. And if you strongly disagree with me, then that's okay. Just tell me why I'm wrong. So, until next time.